Okay, I'm Ed McDowell, or Edgar J. McDowell.
Okay.
I was born in Waitsburg, Washington on June 10th, 1935, in a house, because there's no hospitals
No
there.
hospitals in Waitsburg.
And I first became acquainted with the smell of horses right there on the Touchy Creek. And my grandparents lived over by the Waitsburg racetrack. And we had some of the contestants and the racehorse people who lived with my grandparents there next to the racetrack in Waitsburg. And then I could still smell some of those smells that we had around that neighborhood. And Waitsburg used to be a pretty important place for horses and rodeos and that kind of thing, especially the race horses, because for some reason Washington State had a long period of time when you couldn't do parimutuel betting. And the Waitsburg, rather than being under the state rule there, even though it's southeastern Washington, was operated with some kind of a federal permit. So it was an important racetrack for these guys.
It wasn't an Indian reservation or anything.
It could have been part of the NISPER's
yeah.
regulations, but it was not part of a reservation. It's in Walla Walla County.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and then, so that was Memorial Day weekend. But then after Dayton Days became more important, well, they shifted Memorial Day rodeo and everything to Dayton.
Do you remember about what time period this would have been at?
Well, no, I can't. But
before you left, or?
Probably in the 40s, yeah. But I'm talking when I was fairly young there. But there were always interesting people around.
And that's what sparked your interest in horses and rodeo initially, is
right.
The time that your grandparents.
Oh man, I used to really love those 4-horse chariot races, 4 abreast, and the chuck wagon races and the stagecoach races and that kind of thing. It was always loud and dusty and western.
Now, how old were you when you moved to Ellensburg?
Well, I left Dayton area. We moved to Dayton, where I went through the first 7 grades, and then my dad was a tanker driver, a petroleum tanker driver. So we moved to Ritzville for a year and a half, and then I came to Ellensburg in 1947. But I did end up hearing about the Ellensburg Rodeo a lot in Ritzville.
Before you
came here, because the neighbors all one fall wanted to go to the big Ellensburg Rodeo.
I'll be darned.
And they talked about it, and they all made it over here at that time. And then we came into town. I had stayed in Dayton and worked at Harvest there with some family friends. And then...
so you were in your young teens at this time?
Right, yeah. I was just coming in to enter in the 9th grade when we came into Ellensburg. I remember coming over, coming in on the old Vantage Highway and going out here over Caribou Cut, and my brother was along, and all at once where the irrigation was, which separated the sagebrush from the Kittitas Valley, is in the evening. The breeze hadn't come up yet, so it must have been before 5:30. And the thing about it is, Kittitas Valley was just beautiful. And I think to this day, a lot of our people and population growth has come from this Highway 82 coming over the hill and giving people a real view of the valley.
Well, when you come over those ridges, those sagebrush hills, and then you hit that green valley, it's something else, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You remember what time of year it was?
Yeah, it's right before rodeo.
Okay.
Yeah, because my brother made it clear to me, and we had to have jeans, boots, and buckle and a hat at all times. Otherwise, they'd put you in the what do you call that kind of court, kangaroo court.
Did they have the Chamber Cowboys must have
They
back
did.
then, or
Well, I don't know whether that was outfit that ran it or not,
similar deal?
but they
though?
did have that kind of program.
Okay.
Kept us worried all the time that we didn't have three Western pieces of attire on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we came on to town, and we of course attended the Ellensburg Rodeo. We came past Ron Abel's place, visited with them quite a little while, because Ron was also a tanker driver with my dad.
Okay.
And
Were the
Yeah.
Abels the reason you moved to Ellensburg, or was it a job for your
because
dad?
my dad
or-
was transferred here as an intersection between the coast and the Idaho delivery points for
Okay.
the fuel that they hauled.
Okay.
Yeah. And anyway, Ron always had saddle horses out there and that kind of thing, and we visited with them a lot. And then, what do you think for our next question here?
Well, let's
Yep.
look and see what you are answering them so well. They ask about your spouse, Ed. We'd like to know a little bit about Jill.
Well, she's my first wife,
Okay.
and we were married in December of 1954, same year she graduated from high school. And her name was Jill Connor. And that tape that we have circulating around the Kittitas Valley called the Ellensburg Story. Well, the people of Jill's vintage especially, around 54 graduating class, and some from 53 and some from 52, are on there a lot. And so we want to be sure to have people look back through that and find that tape, because it's really good. Brings up a lot of memories, especially for us old people. But we right away became interested in the posse. I don't know how much you guys want to go into that, but at one time,
Let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
Your first Ellensburg Rodeo was 1947 when you
Yeah,
showed up
right.
to town.
right,
You were a freshman in high school.
There you go.
Graduated from Ellensburg High School in 1953.
yeah,
We're married to Jill in the
54.
winter of 54.
right, because I was in the Army at that time.
Okay, okay.
Gene Jump, Harley Doak, Alan Colmadine, and I, in September of 1954, joined the Army because we heard that the GI Bill was going to go off, and so we all volunteered for the draft for 2 years, and all of us went to college, I think, on the GI Bill. So it was a good plan for us.
What type of duty did you serve?
Well, I was in the infantry in Germany.
Okay.
I can't tell you what each of those fellows did, because after we left Fort Ord, we all went in 4 different directions.
But you all went to boot camp together.
Oh yes,
Okay.
yeah, first 16 weeks so.
Okay.
And then after that, it's about when I lost track of it.
So we're talking 54, you're back home in 56 and going to Central Washington
Right,
State
in order
College
to
at that
get
time? Or?
out of the last 2 or 3 months of the Army, I was only in 21 months and 12 days. And in order to get out of the Army, and I still, because I had a year of college before I went in, I knew I could graduate in 3 years. So I signed up for early release from that 2-year draft in order to go to Central. We called it Sweezy Tech then, because we produced teachers up there. Central Washington State College of Education. Sweezy Tech is what it was called. But anyway, I signed up for the second session of summer school of 56.
And that allowed you to be released from the Army
Yes,
3
a
months
little
early.
early, yes, yes.
Well,
Yeah.
now,
And in time for the Ellensburg Rodeo.
so you made it home. You missed from 47 to 56. You missed 1 or 2 rodeos. It sounds like.
Right. Oh yes, we missed those. But I want to keep thinking posse here if we can, so we can kind of get into some things there.
Okay.
Because I was always interested in that group and their bright yellow sweatshirts and sorrel horses, or shirts and sorrel horses.
So when did you join the posse, Ed?
1967.
Okay.
And now there are people in the posse older than I am, but Larry Charlton has been a member longer than anybody that's in there. And Don Childress and I joined in 1967. I could give you a quick little story here.
Love it.
If you want me to. Or if you don't, I'll give it. But at the same time, they always had a big protocol for you get in the posse. If you had 2 black balls in their spring meeting, you didn't get in. And they had plenty of members, probably about 70 members with 50 active.
Holy cow.
In 1967. Well, anyway, Maynard Linder and Murray Peplow and I always rode down there with those guys, even though we weren't members, and they used us to move chairs and stuff around for the dances that they had on that weekend, and we enjoyed that more than any of them because we were a little bit younger at that time. But anyway, Childress and 2 other fellows, probably Dick Jensen and 1 other, joined legitimately in the spring, April of 1967. And Peplow and Maynard Linder and I were always just around there. And George Mandelis was the captain, and Johnny Sprouse was the drill master. And so anyway, those 2 guys decided that we 3 were going to become members of the posse. Well, a whole lot of old fellows didn't like that idea.
So you had some of those fellows that were recruiting you, but we had some old timers that were a little uncertain
about that, and not going through having somebody pick out your horse and look at your financial statement and whether or not you could ride in that. And we always just wore our winter caps with flaps on them and things like that, because it was pretty chilly there early in April. And so we didn't quite fit the mold for some of those others. I could sure name a bunch of them, like Warren Wood and Herb, up the road here. Herb Martin and Frank Exner and good old old driver who always cared for us, but he felt obligated to the posse to follow the rules. And some of those guys. Bob Hageman would be another good example of that.
of the old school bunch.
Yeah, the old
Okay.
school bunch. So anyway, Johnny Sprouse spoke on our behalf. Oh, they kicked us out of the arena and had us go out back, but we could hear because it got pretty loud in there. And so anyway, George Mandelis stood up there and he says, if you guys don't take these 3 in, I'm going to quit being your captain because they look like pretty good volunteers. And we need Anyway, they had another discussion and vote and took us into the posse at that time, and we've been members ever since. Funny thing about the posse, we've ridden with them lots of times in a lot of activities, but originally the posse put on a horse show there at the fairgrounds, and when World War II came along, they used them primarily, or expected to use them, for traffic directing, because if everybody started leaving the coast, started driving down that 2-lane road of Highway 10, at the way it was at the time, they always figured Ellensburg would need a lot of traffic cop types.
So the Ellensburg Rodeo Posse had part of its start as a traffic control.
Yes, actually
yeah.
they ran the horse show at the fairgrounds
Okay.
in earlier years, and late 30s and early 40s. See, the war started December 7th, 41, you know. And the thing about it is, during that time, you never knew but what the Japanese were going to stir things up on the coast, which would have caused us to have a lot of people real quickly.
Okay.
As soon as they could get here.
So their original mission was as the sponsors for this horse show,
Correct.
the youth horse show.
Right.
And then as their duties evolved or matured, they began.
Well, I have to share with you that you young guys probably wouldn't remember this, but Ellensburg Rodeo Posse, that light just came on. Is that a problem, Stacy? It has been off all that time. Okay, no problem. Well, anyway, the Ellensburg Rodeo Posse put on all 3 night shows, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we were able to get 25% of all the rodeo ticket money in those years
Oh, we don't.
to put on these night shows.
Okay.
On Friday night, we had a junior rodeo, pretty much local contestants, Ellensburg and the county area. Matter of fact, that was a restriction. They had to
It
be.
was limited,
Yes.
I think.
Right. And then on Saturday night, we had horse pulling, cow cutting, and some trick riding, and that kind of thing. And on Sunday night, we had the kind of posse show that's go on to this day, competition among the visiting posses.
Those were some of my earliest memories of the Ellensburg Rodeo, were the posse night shows.
There you go. Good.
Participating in the junior rodeo, and then the
Right.
horse pulling. Didn't you have cow cutting maybe?
Yeah, cow cutting and horse pulling and some trick riding. And that was about the size of it. I remember being the secretary and at one time there, and they always we'd treat the volunteers with whiskey, but we always wrote it on the books as sand hauling. Yeah, because we had a hard time. That was one obvious thing they could do, was load those sandbags on the sleds
Sure.
that they were using for horse pulling, and
So that was a pretty big expense, it sounds like, for the.
well, it was one of those things that you didn't write down all the time. Yes, exactly. And then we had that regular thing going Sunday night.
So before '67, when you joined the posse, were you involved with the Ellensburg Rodeo, or did you volunteer or
No,
spectate?
we
or-
were down there with our kids
Okay.
at all of us at the night show prior to becoming a member.
Okay.
Right. Yes. And then we rode horseback with those people when they were in the hills, and of course a famous McManamy roundup. McManamy, Haberman, and White put on a roundup early in the spring, taking the cattle up in the Lion Rock area, and in the fall gathering them. More party than gather. But anyway, that's what.
Well, that was quite a community event, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, big
I
time.
mean, folks
Yeah.
from all walks of life.
Right. And one time when we were kind of in charge of the junior sheriff's posse, we got permission to take them up to Lion Rock. And so everybody's up there one evening, and all at once all these posse guys start showing up, and the Seattle King County posse showed up, and McManamy and Haberman and White had failed to get permission from the Forest Service to use the Lion Rock deal. So it was kind of touch and go there for a minute, but good old Joe McManamy, the politician that he was, he took everybody over to Haney Meadows from that group, and then we got out of there the next day, but we were in there legitimately, and so the Forest Service people had to kind of back us up on that.
Yeah.
And most people won't even remember there was a change, because that was a long time ago.
A change.
A change in the place in which
Okay.
because we always had the posse and the McManamy deals and the Haberman deal up on Lion Rock.
Now, what was the relationship between the McManamy Roundup and the posse? Did the posse have...
Well, all those fellows were members.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, McManamy was always a member, and of course he had been a rodeo board member too, and
Exner.
Frank Exner, his brother-in-law, was a member of the posse too, and the guy at the, Frank always did the program at the Ellensburg Daily Record. He was a printer, and he gathered up all the information and printed the rodeo day sheets every day prior to the rodeo.
The actual
And,
list of contestants.
Right, they always had the program made already,
Sure.
but the inserts, we called them, he worked on them, and then we distributed them.
Well, that Roundup and the association with the posse is a neat example of how a working ranch and the exhibit of rodeo,
Right.
you know, are connected.
Well, now that you mention ranches, I better be sure and add the hands, because it was kind of a hand McManamy deal.
Okay, yeah.
Jim Hand and McManamy were stepbrothers, I think, and so they came into the valley about the same time in the same area, and so it was Hand McManamy, Haberman, and White, Jack White, that had that United States Forest Service permit up there for the livestock.
So they ran their cattle on the Forest Service
Right,
ground.
right. Yeah, they had good people at that time. I'm going to be hard put for names, but who were in charge of the managing the livestock up there from the Forest Service. And I have to mention Shaller Bennett real quickly. Shaller Bennett was a summer up there in the summer with his cabin with his wife, and is supposedly looking after the cattle, but he'd get on his horse in the morning and he'd get off at night. He'd never get off to pee during the day because he knew he'd know he could have a terrible time getting back on. One time he was chopping wood up there and hit his leg with an axe, and so a couple weeks go by. He had a tremendous amount of infection in his leg because he had it wrapped up with some old visqueen and plastic there. And,
Growing that stuff.
oh, it was growing.
I smell
And
it.
what do we call those darn bugs that were on there? It had gangrene in it, and they had what do you call these little
Worms.
gadgets you fish with?
Yeah.
Oh, maggots.
Yeah, he was full of maggots.
Yeah.
And so they took him to the hospital when we found him up there. And they wouldn't take those maggots off because they were doing a good job of cleaning off the proud flesh, which shows you how tough that Shaller Bennett really was. And where else we headed, Nip?
Well, who are some of the famous cowboys and cowgirls you remember from Ellensburg?
I'm a little
Rodeo?
trouble on that.
Okay.
I remember when I was high school, Casey Tibbs was there.
Oh, okay.
But it's the only one I can really remember. And more importantly, Harry Vold had a horse named Snake, and I'm trying to think of the other one. But they had two really good saddle bronc and bareback horses in the arena, bucking guys off, but they could lead them through the parade.
And they did.
And they did.
I'll be darned.
The other horse I can't think of, seems he's kind of a spotted thing, and he is maybe called War Paint or something.
Okay.
But anyway, those two at least. And, oh man, I forget. George Prescott was the rodeo announcer in those days. And he also worked
Wasn't
for
he
the
a state
chamber.
politician or senator at one time?
If so,
or-
I don't recall it.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, he was a Chamber of Commerce manager and worked with Kay Hagerman down there as a Chamber of Commerce. Before the Antlers Hotel burned, that was where the headquarters was, in
For
the
the
Antlers
Ellensburg
Hotel
Rodeo.
for the Ellensburg Rodeo. And probably a lot of the history of the rodeo and so on was lost in that fire.
Now, did George announce with another professional announcer
was
or
it.
somebody from out of town, or he was
He
the
was
voice
it,
of the
and he
Ellensburg
was a
Rodeo?
good one.
Okay.
And once again, he's on that tape called the Ellensburg Story. And a good guy for the community. In those days, they didn't make much money, he and Kay, but they surely handled the rodeo board work and the Chamber of Commerce work.
It's interesting how that partnership continues, where the Ellensburg Rodeo and the Chamber of Commerce share the same
Building there.
headquarters downtown.
Yes, that kind of came about for a financial thing when they bought the driver house there. Yeah. Every club in town donated money for that. I think the posse only donated about 5,000 for that originally. But, oh, and then I was telling you about 25% of the ticket money when we were having all 3 nights of the night show. But it's interesting to me that they finally figured out that was quite a bit of money. And so they cut it down to 25 cents a ticket. Well, and then the junior rodeo got moved to the week before, and then some of the boys involved with the rodeo board and fair board, we better mention the fair board here, I guess, also, but they decided big name people. And at that time, a guy like Roy Clark was only $10,000, but I remember thinking that was a tremendous amount of money and voted against that. Of course, I wanted to see the night shows kept by the posse, and sooner or later, that all went about. But
Was that late 70s probably, Ed, or
well, yes.
early 80s when they
No,
moved towards it?
probably in the 70s. I was captain in 1979, and it was already, there was quite a bit of pressure on the rodeo board using the night shows to try to bring in revenue for the rodeo so that we could offer more money for each contest for the money added part.
Got it.
So that's a logical thing for
Sure.
that to evolve.
But
And-
that's one of the changes we see. That's a question we're going to get at here in a minute, the commercialization and how the rodeo changed from a community event to a
Right.
maybe more business oriented event. Is that fair to say, do you think? Or
Well, yes.
how do you feel?
But there were
about
a lot more people involved than just Ellensburg cowboys and county cowboys in the rodeo in those days. We still had national people coming in as far as the rodeo contestants go, and then always with Ellensburg Rodeo and Pendleton and Lewiston, there was a big draw for the cowboys to come to the Northwest because they had some good paydays to apply toward their standing for the national finals rodeo.
Yeah, the big four, Ellensburg and Walla Walla and
Now it
Lewiston.
has become, as you say, commercialized. It's kind of like football and basketball. You go there and you watch fewer contestants, but they are a lot better. I got to tell you something about a bucking horse. Good old Bill Hutzel and his son Don Hutzel and Riley over there in the Snake River had this mare named Spring Fling that's may still be bucking to this day. But anyway, she was really good, both saddle bronc and bareback. I think she might have been in the national finals this last year or two.
Well, you know what? She's going to be inducted into the Ellensburg Rodeo Hall of Fame this fall.
I probably shouldn't tell you what I'm going to tell you, but I'm going to tell you anyway. One day, and that's the way I understood it, it's after they bucked her, and within another day or two they were going to buck her again. She was in with a bunch of other horses. They went out there and found this baby colt. And have you really?
I think so.
I hope you have heard it, because I know it's true in my heart. Because Bill Hutzel would have never fibbed to us. He might stretch things a little, but he never would fib to us. And anyway, that was kind of a novelty, and they ended up raising that foal on the bottle. But anyway, Spring Fling has been a good one. Still to this day. So it isn't as if she's real old, but she fits that professionalism you're talking about.
Sure.
For horses and cowboys, and of course the Beards and Volds and Kelseys. They're all, and Big Bend now, they call Big Bend and Flying Five the Hutzel Riley deals. Now, I've always been interested in whether they made any money, or their other jobs were used to support the rodeo business.
Did you ever get to the bottom of it?
Never did,
Yeah.
and we never will.
Probably not.
But the thing about it is, some guys have told me, when I've kind of posed that question, I do ask a lot of questions, irritates a lot of my friends, but the thing about it is, eventually you get around to facts.
There you go.
And what I think is, there's not a lot of people in the business, because it's very expensive.
Sure it is.
As it becomes more professionalized. Now, there's not too many guys coming up like Frank Beard and his father-in-law, Johnny Bell. Is that right, Johnny Bell?
Van Bell.
Johnny Van Bell, yeah. Anyway, those kind of, Kelsey kind of tried to come on, and another rodeo outfit up there around Okanagan too, it slips me. But anyway, those little guys don't have much of opportunity to compete.
Boy, they don't.
No.
They just,
I have a friend named Kenny Carroll who has bucking bulls, and he pretty much is only able to get into the smaller rodeos and fair deals like the Grace Harbor and some of those others. But one of these days he'll get a good one, because he works real hard on breeding up for them.
it seems like the existing contractors are always looking for those kind of guys.
Oh, right,
stock.
yeah. Yeah, they try to pick out their best.
Frank's grandson Daniel Beard is
He's
trying to
working on that
continue,
too,
yeah,
and of
yeah.
course Frank did too. And I don't know whether Frank used to sell his best in the early days when he was getting started or not. He may or may not have. But anyway, he is such a good guy, nobody'd take advantage of him. Where are we going from here?
Well, that's one thing I was interested about, Ed, is your role as ambassadors for the Ellensburg Rodeo.
I'm glad you put
The
it that way.
Ellensburg Rodeo posses, famous throughout the Northwest.
I'm glad you put it that way. We're pretty much an advertising arm for the community and the rodeo and the fair. We cannot forget the fair,
Okay.
because
There's no prejudice here. We
No,
support
no.
the Labor Day event.
well, and they used to have a lot of overlapping members,
Oh, okay.
but then if they were overlapping too much, they always had to end up declaring their loyalty either to the posse or the rodeo board or the fair board.
I see.
And so they'd oftentimes quit the overlapping part.
Okay.
But that's just community stuff, you
Sure.
know, and it happens. But
Where were some of your favorite places that you'd travel to around the state?
Oh,
to represent
ever,
the Ellensburg Rodeo.
every spring we'd start with the Wenatchee Apple Blossom Festival, and then later, about the middle or 2/3 the way through May, we'd have the Lilac Festival in Spokane.
Okay.
And then, as far as favorites go, of course, just like this weekend, we're going to see Olympia, Lake Fair days, and in a couple more weeks, you have Seattle Sea Fair. The pirates and the horses get along fine.
You ride in that torchlight parade? Is
There
that,
you
yeah,
go.
yeah,
Yes, yeah.
can get a little dicey, I bet.
Well, it's all right,
Yeah.
but it's hard to believe how many people are actually there. One time, we were all at the Highway Grill before they moved it, and I remember Roger Weaver was a rodeo board member, and he came in there. He was talking to the posse. We were there one morning after the Sea Fair. It had even been in the paper. There were 300,000 people there, and there are 10, 12 people deep for blocks over there.
300,000.
That's a definite deal.
Holy cow.
And that's something for you guys who are interested in rodeo to pay attention to when you're spending your advertising dollars. But anyway, old Roger said, "What'd you guys have out there? Probably 30,000 people or so?" Well, he had his decimal in the wrong place. And this year, you ought to pay attention to that, because the posse's still there and some equestrian groups are there. But they try to limit the number of horses in the parade over there, because they already have a lot of entry-level people. And then, of course,
There's a standing invitation for the Ellensburg Rodeo posse.
well, it was until Molly Morrow and her, and I love you, Molly, if you ever see this, but she was in this really good group, and of the Ellensburg equestrians. They got their application in first. And so one year we were left out.
Uh-oh.
But being good people like Molly and her friends were, they let the Ellensburg Rodeo posse ride with the equestrians and the rodeo board queens and that kind of thing.
Great.
Yeah, so we had a whole Ellensburg contingent that year. Yeah.
What about hosting visiting posses during the Ellensburg Rodeo?
Oh,
That seems
boy.
like something.
That's a
that
big
is
deal. I'm sure Oscar Berger will tell you a lot more about that. But actually, my good bride Jill and some of her friends, posse wives, started, and I'm not going to be able to say the year, by putting on a Sunday morning breakfast. And we've been doing that for a large number of years. We had it at Johnny Sprouse's place up the road here the first time. And we had hot air balloons and all that kind of thing that year. But
It's one of the hottest tickets in town Labor Day weekend.
it was.
Yeah.
We hardly ever got any sleep before the Sunday morning breakfast, because we also had dances out at the Posse House at the Kittitas County Bowers Field out there.
Beautiful.
And everybody danced and had a good time until, gosh, 2 in the morning or so. And then we had to move all the chairs and everything from out there at the Posse House into wherever we were going to throw the breakfast. And it was pretty much an all-night deal.
Boy, that sounds
And the
like-
women were out there early getting the grill set up and the pancakes. And we did have 500 or 600 people at the breakfast.
Wow.
And that many out the Posse House. They really didn't have limitations those days on how many people could be in, but we left all the doors open. And
Quick escape.
yeah, and then the thing about it is,
These were community members and visiting posses.
pretty much
Yeah.
the base and the reason we're doing it was for the visiting posses, yes. Oh man, and there was just reciprocity, because like in Olympia, they always had a big oyster feed for us and a dance after Lake Fair, and Queen's deals over there at Seattle for the Seattle
Seafair.
Lake, what?
Seafair.
Seafair type things, yeah, you're right, excuse me. But anyway, those, oh, and then on Monday night, they had a hamburger feed before people took off to go back home, because they usually did a little drinking, and hamburgers help sober them up a little bit. And the thing about it is, so they'd be out on the highway less likely to get a ticket. Rodeo board used to have the posse and all the visiting posses and the stock contractors and everybody throw a party on Monday night after rodeo. But it just got too big for the rodeo board members to pay for. Previously we had very wealthy people on the rodeo board, but as time went along, those kind of parties at the Elks Club usually on Monday night after rodeo, it's called the President's Party from the rodeo board, and they'd throw a really fancy party. And then that's when we started feeding them hamburgers before they left us, when the posse, just 4 or 5 people from the posse would go to this rodeo board president's banquet, or whatever they wanted to call it, kind of a thank you type deal for stock contractors and some of the contestants, a lot of them actually. So you can imagine how big a deal it was.
Gosh, yeah.
We had to leave the doors open at the Elks Club at that time too, because we had a lot of people there.
Oh, there's a place on this, huh?
A lot of people, that's true. The building's still there.
Yeah.
If anybody had any desire to really do those things again, they could easily enough.
Well, it was, sure a neat meeting place in town. Ed, you're doing a great job here. We've answered just about everything on here.
Touched about
I
everything.
think so.
I know that I'm happy to hear that you're going to see Tuffy and Bertha Morrison, and that you've talked to Peggy Hunt and Buck Miner, brother and sister, and that you're going to see Oscar Berger. As far as posse representation, he's our historian, and he'd really be good for your interviews. And then, who the heck else did we talk about? You were going to see Frank Beard and Jerry Anderson. Yeah, he said, you guys said you were going to see them, and they're really good people, and you'll enjoy that.
Well,
And I appreciate you coming here and catching me with my oxygen on and everything.
We got it on full tilt.
Okay, good, yeah.
Well, Ed, thank you.
It's been
Appreciate
really good.
Yes, it
Yep,
has.
thank you.
You told a great story.
Yeah, we enjoyed your grandfather there. Early on, I knew him before I knew your dad or you or your other 4th generation boy.
Well, it's neat
Tate,
how that
isn't it?
Ellensburg Rodeo is a family event, really is.
Absolutely.
Generation after generation, your family's been a part of it and continues
Yeah.
to be. And,
This is true. Yeah. Takes the volunteers just like you and Stacy coming here on a hot afternoon, and the breeze hadn't come up, so we don't have any air conditioning yet, but we will have another half an
won't be
hour.
long, yeah.
And if it wasn't for Stacy Young and Nip Tucker types, well, we wouldn't have near as good
Well, the whole town full.
county deal, but everybody has their part to make sure this thing works, yeah. Well,
And then that was an old one, and I can't remember what year that was. But that was a real old one. Centennial one was the white.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And that was the one with Maynard.
Yeah.
The Hall of Fame.
Was that?
Get in there close enough. There's so much stuff around here, generated and everything.
Just fine.
National Bank of Commerce.
Yeah, that was one of the first years he was in.
Wow.
A neighbor lady, she lived down here, Smiths. Well, you remember Jean Smith? And yeah.
Seemed like the posse kind of took a dip in membership for a while, and now it kind of seems like
Coming
more
back.
young people. And
Yeah. That's when Ed went in, really, it had kind of started dropping off, and so they wanted to get some new blood in there, new people. And then it started picking up. It really, we had a good membership. And then it seemed
I
like
was
it,
surprised when he said 50.
yeah. Well, there were 50 members, but they weren't active,
Okay.
yeah. You had ones like Hinkles and Robinsons,
Oh, okay.
Robertsons, and a lot of those that were just members, but they weren't
Didn't ride.
didn't ride anymore. Awful lot of them didn't ride. And Cal Shaw, I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah,
He was
The leather man.
a, right, yeah, Cal now. And she used to make all the posse shirts.
Oh, she did.
And then